Okay, little quick blurb here on what I'm doing. I'm getting ready to work on my iris quilt, and I believe I mentioned I want to make it look like a picture. So I want to look like a matted frame. I thought about doing strips of fabric along each side, and I think that would look nice, but that's still not what I want it to look like. So I'm experimenting, and I'm going to try this to see if it works. So I've taken my fabric and I've cut it the size that I want my finished piece to be. Cut 2 pieces out for each of the 3 colors that I'm using for my mat, and then I've got interfacing. I cut it the same size, and then I cut like a 1/4 of an inch off so that it's just a tiny bit smaller, just so that I don't end up getting over it off the fabric when I'm fusing it. So I'm going to fuse interfacing onto each of my 3 pieces of one color, or each of my 3 colors, 1 piece of each. And then when I'm done with that, I will go on to the next step, which will be drawing and making a window basically in the fabric. If you've ever done a zipper where you have a 1/2 inch line, you do a line and you do another line and you do the ends, and then you cut in the middle and angle to the corners and you fold that around. That's basically what I'm going to do. Just it's going to be a bigger window, bigger opening. So I'm going to fuse this, and when I get all 3 fused, then we'll get back to the next part. Okay, so here we are. We've got the interfacing, and by the way, I'm using Craft Fuse 808, I think it is. Yes, 808 by Pellon. I wanted something that had some definite body to it. I did think about just using the fabric and not having interfacing, but like I said, I wanted some body and some thickness to it like you would have with a mat board. So I drew from corner to corner so that I could find the exact center. And then I measured my little cross stitch piece, and I want this to be an opening of 7 inches. I'm actually going to do it probably, instead of stitching on the line, I'm going to stitch right next to it because just a hair smaller might be better. Anyway, so I'm going to stitch around the square that I've made, and then I'm going to cut about 1 inch or 2. I'm not sure how far. If I was going to do this for a zipper, then I would, you'd have like a 1/4 inch because you're doing like a 1/2 inch thing. And then it's best if you understitch. So you would take your backside and stitch it before you roll it under and press it. And then you would stitch really close to the edge. But I don't want the stitching to show, so I'm not going to do that quite the same. But I will, cut the majority of this out. I want to leave at least 1 inch or so that it goes over a ways. Cut to the diagonal, and then I will flip this kind of inside out so that it will make a window. So I'm going to stitch this, and then we'll go on from there. Didn't mean to shut that off. Okay, so again, I'm going to stitch just inside that line. Now I am feeling pretty confident about doing the mats this way. I have not decided for sure what I'm doing about the frame part of the picture because I want that to have a little more depth and dimension to it. So I'm gonna have to experiment with that one a little bit. Okay, so now we don't need these pins in here. So I'm going to fold this in half, make sure I don't have anything loose getting in the way there. Let's make a cut to get started. I will get closer into the corner, but I'm going to use a smaller pair of scissors to do that so it's a little more exact. Because you want to be up basically right to the corner, but you don't want to go through the stitching. And if you don't get quite up to the stitching, then you'll end up with a kind of a pleat, wrinkled area. It won't be smooth. Okay, so now the idea is this side will turn in this way. So these flaps will go down, and I will probably cut this excess off. I'm just demonstrating right now how this works. Put a pin there to help hold it for the moment. Ouch. Careful not to stab yourself. Okay, so now obviously I want to trim off the excess that I have, and I need to press this to make sure it's nice and smooth, but the idea is to get this done, and then that will make a mat on there. And then I will do that with the other colors, and they will go out from there. And that's how this is going to look like a picture frame with a mat. And then again, like I said, all I have to do is figure out what I'm doing about the actual frame part, because I want that to look different. So anyway, that's where we're at, and I'm gonna get the other pieces stitched, and I'm gonna get these all pressed and get them ready, and then I can start assembling the quilt. Okay, so I got my first mat done. I got it centered on here. I have my batting and my backing. And basically what I did was I stitched in far enough that this will be covered by the next layer, but it kind of helps keep the quilt quilted, more or less, keeps it contained. I mean, this is going to be hanging on the wall. It's not like it's getting a lot of use, but anyway, that's how it looks so far. I have my other frame pieces done, and obviously the purple one's a little bit oversized, but I have those done. So what I'm going to do is do the next one, get that out of the way. I'll center it on there, which would be easier to do with two hands, but that's okay. So we'll get this centered on here, and then I'll do the same thing. I will stitch further out so it's away from the edge and where it will be covered by the last frame or last mat. And then I'll put the last mat on there and get that centered. And this one I'll end up stitching around the end, and then we'll worry about the frame. Still haven't got that 100% figured out, but I think I know what I'm doing now. So this is what I'm working on. This is how far I've gotten. It's kind of slow because I'm doing a new thing that I've never done before. But that's kind of fun, you know, figuring something out that's new. Anyway, hope you're enjoying this, and I will see you later. One little quick note here. When I started this, I cut out my interfacing the size of my finished quilt. And I did the little center thing where I cut out, made the window. As I started working on trying to figure out my frame, because I'm kind of figuring that off, you know, on the side, I realized I have way too much thickness to be able to finish this, because I have, you know, 2 layers of fabric and heavy duty interfacing for each of the mats, which there's 3 of them. So that's 6 layers of fabric and 3 layers of super heavy duty interfacing. Then I have my batting, I have my backing, and then of course I will have the frame, which also is going to have interfacing and batting, I think, and 2 layers of fabric. So it was getting way too stiff and too unwieldy. So I finally decided I need to have interfacing to cover, you know, the area that I'm going to stitch here. The last one will have to have it pretty much all the way out because I need it to help keep the structure for the body of it. But I decided for the rest of it, I need to get rid of as much as possible. So what I have done, fortunately this interfacing wasn't fusing really well, so I have been able to pull it back, and I have just taken that off. And I'm going to finish doing that on this one. I've done 2 sides. Got 2 more sides to do, so that this layer has interfacing up through here, which is where it will need it, and then it doesn't have it out here, which is where I need it out of the way. So just figured I should point out that this wasn't a tutorial, but if you were looking at it as instructions on how to do this, I changed my mind. It didn't work as well as I thought it was going to at first. Again, I'm learn something new every day.